We'll start with just this, which is what would a third Jamal Bowman term look like? What would be the goal for that?
It would look like reparations for New York 16. There's so many parts of the district that have been forgotten, marginalized, and left behind. So many people have been disempowered by our political process.
We'll start with just this, which is what would a third Jamal Bowman term look like? What would be the goal for that?
It would look like reparations for New York 16. There's so many parts of the district that have been forgotten, marginalized, and left behind. So many people have been disempowered by our political process. And those are the exact people that we are working directly with and governing with. And we have been governing with since I've gotten into office. So take the Westchester Youth Shelter, for example, an amazing program that focuses on alternatives to incarceration. If you're a young person and you've done something wrong and you need to be held accountable, this is a program that doesn't put you in jail, but helps to rehabilitate you. We partnered them with an amazing organization in New York called the CARE program that's now going to provide mental health supports and substance abuse supports to the young people who have made a mistake and committed harm in their communities, so that it's not just rehabilitation in words, but actually bringing in research-based approaches to make sure they do not make the same mistake again. That's just one example. Bronx Health Community Network on White Plains Road in the Bronx, an area that lacks access to affordable health care. This is going to be a health network that focuses on supporting those who are uninsured and underinsured. We've brought over $1 billion to the district so far, investing in everything from climate justice to affordable housing to child care to education to workforce development in Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, but also in the Bronx, Rye, Mamaroneck, and Hastings. And so a third term would be just a continued celebration of the community organizing, but bringing back resources and supporting and passing transformative legislation like the CHIPS and Science Act to bring manufacturing jobs to the district. So so much work to do, man, so much work to do.
And to that point, I mean, look, I was at a bill introduction today when it comes to mental health care investments that you would like to do. You have sponsored the Green New Deals for public schools.
Yes.
You co-sponsored the Green New Deal for public housing. The list goes on from there. These are all very big ideas. Part of the commentary you've heard from Latimer, if we're going to be blunt, is that these are big ideas, but you know how Washington works. Those big things don't happen overnight. So are you okay with incrementalism?
No, I'm not okay with incrementalism, because incrementalism leaves women, poor people, and black and brown people behind. One of the reasons why Southwest Yonkers continues to be underserved is because of incrementalism. Incrementalism benefits privileged people who tend to be white men and hurts everybody else. So I'm not okay with incrementalism. Build Back Better was a big idea. We fought very hard to pass Build Back Better. It would have been universal child care, universal pre-K, paid leave, investments in home care, investments in affordable housing. We didn't pass Build Back Better, but we did pass the Inflation Reduction Act, and we were a part of that fight as well. Historic investments in climate justice, capping insulin costs at $35 a month. Medicare now has the ability to negotiate drug prices. Seniors will pay no more than $2,000 per year. That was a big idea. We fought for that. That was implemented in my first term. We wrote a letter to Biden to ban ghost guns, because gun violence is the #1 killer of children in our country, and it impacts our district directly. Biden banned ghost guns. We wrote a letter with Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren, to push the Biden administration to take action on affordable housing and rent stabilization. The Biden administration just took action on rent stabilization across the country. And so this country was created and moves based on big ideas. You have the big ideas that are rooted in research and rooted in community. You organize with community. You work the inside game. You work the outside game. You bring it together, and then you make history. That's how this works.
Let's throw the elephant out there completely in the middle of everything, which is you are facing a challenge, an aggressive challenge from George Latimer. Why are you the better choice for this district for 2 more years?
Well, it's not just about him. It's about what he represents. He's partnering with special interests. He's partnering with racist Republican MAGA donors who support Donald Trump. He's partnering with people who were convicted of fraud on Wall Street to raise a ton of money to buy this congressional seat for special interests while continuing to support wealth inequality and the destruction of our democracy. It's not about him, it's about what he represents. We are and always have been rooted in the grassroots, rooted in working people, and governing with and for working people. I was raised by a single mom during the crack cocaine epidemic. Addiction impacted my family. I'm the first in my family to go to college. I went into education. I had the privilege of opening my own schooling, running it as a principal for 10.5 years. I've lived the struggles of working class people. I've seen the struggles through my students and through my families. So now we govern with the working class, and we govern with progressives who have a new vision for the district and our foreign policy as it relates to saving our democracy, which is what this campaign is all about. Beating Trump, beating racist Republicans, and making sure our democracy works for everyone. Because if it doesn't, we don't have a democracy.
I mean, part of his argument in ads is that he can deliver real progressive results. Have you seen that from his time as Westchester County Executive?
No, I have not seen that in his time. And it's very interesting because, again, as I mentioned before, we delivered over $1 billion to the district. There's at least 37 programs that we directly had a hand in terms of investment or in terms of making connections and creating something new based on what wasn't there before. Let me give you one example. Yeah. A young girl, Kayla Green, was stabbed and killed in Mount Vernon a couple years ago because of a conflict that arose off social media, that got worse on social media, excuse me, but it rose from cheerleading conflicts. Yeah. You know, we went and met with the mayor the next day. I met with the cheerleaders. I talked to some of the coaches, talked to educators and families to get an understanding of what went on. We then partnered with the Mount Vernon Youth Bureau to bring in $999,000 to help them focus on at-risk girls to make sure that this horrible tragedy never happens again. That's what we mean by progressive results. We worked in partnership with the Hastings-on-the-Hudson mayor, the Tuckahoe mayor, and the Ardsley mayor, and the Mamaroneck town supervisor to invest in those small municipalities on issues related to climate justice, economic development, and affordable housing. So not only are we serving Yonkers, YWCA, program that helps homeless women, we're now helping them with money, with $670,000 to invest in workforce development programs and to expand the workforce development that they're doing in Yonkers. Yeah. So whether it's Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, the Bronx, or other parts of the district, that's progressive results. My opponent has been the executive in charge of a budget for 7 years. Where's the anti-poverty program? Where's the anti-violence program? Where's the workforce development program? Where are the investments in education? Where is the public health approach to public safety so that we could deal with the issues of public safety as it's happening in certain parts of the district? He said out loud he had to go to Israel to see bullet holes for the first time. There's shootings that have been happening in his county for 7 years. That tells me you're not showing up, you're not grieving with the families, and you're not doing anything legislatively or monetarily to help the communities most in need in those districts, in those parts of the district, which is unacceptable.
Part of the criticism of you from the beginning of this primary battle has been that you make headlines, quote unquote, for all the wrong reasons. And he points to, and there have been incidences, the fire alarm. Your blog posts from about 2 decades ago about 9/11.
2 decades ago.
Calling the initial reports that Israeli women were raped propaganda. Mm-hmm. What were you thinking?
What was I thinking in terms of what?
Of all of those incidents.
I mean, the fire alarm was a mistake. I owned up to that immediately. The blog from 2 decades ago, we shouldn't even be talking about it in this race. I wasn't in Congress then, but I said I don't believe in those conspiracy theories. And as soon as the UN provided additional evidence of the women being raped, we voted yes on the bill that addressed that issue, and we made a statement condemning, obviously, the rape by Hamas. So when we make a mistake or do something wrong, we acknowledge it publicly and then try to move on. That's leadership. That's the leadership that I've tried to provide since I've been in Congress. That's the leadership I tried to provide as a middle school principal. And that's the leadership we try to develop in others. You got to take accountability. You shouldn't be making excuses. And you should try to move forward to right the wrongs that you may have caused. And that's what we do. But my opponent is talking about these things because he doesn't want to talk about my record. My record is crystal clear. When you look at any category as it relates to what does our society need to make our democracy work, whether it's fighting directly with Republicans, taking on Marjorie Taylor Greene, taking on Thomas Massey on gun violence, taking on Byron Donalds, taking on Mike Lawler. We've taken them on head-to-head debates on CNN to stand up and fight for our democracy, whether it's reproductive rights and fighting for reproductive freedom in the community with grassroots organizations like Birth from the Earth, Nubia Martin, and others. We work with them to ensure not just reproductive freedom, but also focusing on areas like Black maternal health. Yeah. So we have continuously done the work with community on the ground, and I could give you like 50 other examples. So you want to focus on the blog post I wrote 20 years ago? Cool, that's on you. We're going to make sure the people are reminded of what we've delivered for the district, not just in terms of money, but in terms of building political power and engagement with historically marginalized communities.
Before I move on, just to put a final pin on this though.
Yes.
Why should voters trust your judgment?
I mean, we've been making good decisions since we've gotten into Congress. One or two or three mistakes or mishaps do not represent my record in Congress. We've taken thousands of votes. We've passed historic pieces of legislation. We've brought in historic dollars for the district. And we show up. And I'm saying we, because we work with community on these pieces, but I also have an incredible staff, an incredible chief of staff, an incredible district office. We haven't even talked about my district office and how they've tackled the immigration issue, for example, working on the ground with the Ardsley Mayor, Neighbors Link, Make the Road, and other organizations to help put recently arrived immigrants on a pathway to citizenship. We've worked to reconnect at least 10 families who hadn't seen each other in years in our district. That's the real work. So, you know, our record speaks for itself. The work is out there, and we'll continue to celebrate that work with community.
One of the defining issues of this race, and seemingly part of the instigation for Latimer even jumping into the race, has been the Israel-Hamas war. Mm-hmm. We have seen Biden seemingly take a bit of a different, at least rhetorical approach within the last week or so. What do you make of what he's saying now, including saying that Netanyahu's been making mistakes, suggesting they have not gone far enough in recent days to stand up to the promises that were made on that phone call? I think he made that headline just today. Are you satisfied with what you're seeing from Biden in the last week or so?
So just to be clear, I support President Biden. I support him in his re-election in November. We have to continue to work with the president and push the president to hold Israel accountable and Netanyahu accountable for their mass murdering of Gaza civilians. We should not be sending additional weapons to Israel at this time. We need a permanent ceasefire. We need a release of the hostages. And we need the humanitarian trucks to get into Gaza right now because famine is setting in. And we already have pictures of babies and children starving to death. We are losing our moral authority on the global stage. And if we don't do something about this and hold Netanyahu accountable, it's only going to get much worse for us and for Israel. And so we're going to continue to communicate with the president, talk with the White House, push the president to do more. It can't just be words, it has to be deeds. And, you know, in our district, the majority support a permanent ceasefire. The majority are against how the president is engaging with Netanyahu at this time. And the majority also doesn't want U.S. dollars to be sent to another country to kill babies and children, especially when they can't afford housing and utilities and childcare, and they need resources for their own communities. And that's what I'm hearing on the ground. That's what our polling is showing us, and that's the truth.
How do you engage and reassure the Jewish community in your district?
Yeah, well, we've been working with the Jewish community and engaging with them since 2019. Yeah. Just doing the best we can for them to get to know me as a person and understand how I feel about not just the state of Israel and its treatment of Palestinians, which I've been very public about, but also how we come together and fight anti-Semitism in a real way. Criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic, and the work needs to be done to make sure everyone understands that and we're on the same page with that. And doing the work to fight anti-Semitism happens on the ground with real people. And education, as an educator, I know is a major part of that work. There's a lack of knowledge and understanding on the history of Jews around the world. There's a lack of knowledge there. There's a lack of knowledge and understanding of African Americans and Muslims and other groups of people. We have to fight anti-Semitism, we have to fight Islamophobia, we have to fight sexism and racism all at the same time. And so my reassurance to the Jewish community is you're going to have a champion fighting against anti-Semitism in a real way. One quick example of how we've already done it. We brought a group of students from the Bronx, a Bronx Middle School, Baychester Middle School, to Washington to take a tour of the White House, take a tour of the Capitol. They saw my office, and they went to the Holocaust Museum. And in the letters they wrote to me after their trip, many of them identified the Holocaust Museum as being one example of their favorite part of the trip, because there was many things that they learned in that museum that they didn't know. Yeah. And when I went to Israel with J Street, and when I went to the West Bank and met with former IDF soldiers as part of the Breaking the Silence program and met with scholars on both sides, I made sure to visit Yad Vashem, which is a powerful, powerful museum focused on what happened during the Holocaust. And it was a reminder of the overlap. The Nazis used eugenic, fake racist science to target the Jewish community in the same way that eugenics was used here in the US to target the black community. Yep. And so I've had these experiences to once again show and display, this is who I am. I'm here, I'm learning, I'm willing to work with anyone, but we have to fight for justice and freedom and self-determination for all people, because what happens in Israel impacts what happens to the Palestinians as well.
I believe it was the Nazis that actually cited Jim Crow
to
justify their handling of the Jewish population. Latimer, after the World Central Kitchen strike, was quoted by Politico as saying there was no defense for what happened. But he didn't go so far as to say, as we heard from, for example, the president, that he was outraged. Mm-hmm. Do you think his remarks in light of that attack have been sufficient?
I think my opponent is bought and paid for by AIPAC, and he's chosen to partner with them and MAGA, Trump, mega donors to beat the first black man in U.S. history in this congressional seat. I think my opponent is dangerously aligning himself with Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump supporters, and a party that includes Marjorie Taylor Greene, in order to defeat a black man who's fighting for justice, freedom, and equality for all people. And I say it that way because we are a majority-minority district. This is a person who's been in office way longer than me and has been executive in the county for longer than I've been in office. Yet there are not enough resources and investments and time and attention paid to the parts of the district who are black and brown and progressive and marginalized. And to me, that's completely unacceptable and deplorable and makes him unfit for this job.
Do you buy the excuse from Netanyahu that the strike on the aid workers was a grave mistake?
No. If they can target a diplomat in the Iran consulate specifically and strategically, they know what is happening on the ground in Gaza. It's at best extreme incompetence, which I think we've seen time and time again, and at worst is complete inhumanity. And it's scary because, at the beginning of the siege, we heard language like there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. We've heard language like they are human animals. We heard language like, remember what Amalek did to you. They cut off food and water and electricity at the beginning. They used white phosphorus to destroy churches, hospitals, schools, etc., etc. And so this is why Netanyahu needs to be removed immediately, and we need to figure out a pathway forward in the U.S. By the way, we wrote a letter to President Biden in March of 2023, concerned about the consistent violence that was happening in the West Bank, because it was historic, the level of violence. And we pretty much said to the president, if we don't step in, this is going to get worse. This was in March.
Of last year.
Yes, of last year. And then October 7th happens, and now we're here.
I'll stay on this to keep the thought going. There is, touching on news of the day, on Capitol Hill, we will see what is put on the floor. Would you be willing to vote, though, for a Ukraine-Israel aid package, or did you need to see them split?
I need to see them split. We want to support a Ukraine package. We have to support a Ukraine package, and we should support a Ukraine package. But there's no way I can support any weapons or military aid to Israel right now while babies are starving.
Even with conditions?
There's no way that can happen.
And then, in the mix of all of this is the question of whether Speaker Johnson will keep his job. Would you, in any scenario, vote to protect him?
I'm following Democratic leadership on this particular vote, and I'm pretty sure that my vote is going to be Hakeem Jeffries time and time again on this particular issue.
Your district has recently been redrawn. I don't know if you know.
Yeah. I've been working on it for years, yes.
What did you make of where the maps landed, and have they altered? I mean, obviously, it did not change dramatically, but does that alter your thinking or approach to this race at all?
No, we always run like it's the fourth quarter, 2 minutes to go, and the score is tied. That's how we run. So it didn't matter where the lines were going to land. I'm still very disappointed and concerned that when they first drew the lines in 2022, they decreased the black population in my district by a third. 180,000 black people were taken out of the district after the district finally got its first black representative. Yeah. And these new lines didn't correct for that. What they did was they moved some black people from one area to the other. And I would have liked to have seen more of a correction, not bring all 180,000 back, but more of a correction, not for me, but for the communities of interest that organized and testified online and in person to keep that a strong black voting bloc. So the no correction happened, which is very frustrating to see. Having said that, we love Co-op City, we missed Co-op City, and even as important as Co-op City, the school that I founded and was principal for 10.5 years is now back in the district. Like that was, someone said to me the next day, you got your heart back. And that's real talk. Like I had suppressed emotions related to losing the school that I founded, Casa Middle School, but to get it back was very emotional and very moving.
Are you confident about November?
Yes. You went to November. I thought you was going to ask about June. I'm confident about June.
You're confident about June.
Confident about June, yes.
I guess still staying on that, are you confident that Biden will keep the White House?
Well, here's the thing, right? And this is why June matters so much and my race matters so much. And let me say for the listeners, for those watching this, June 25th is the primary day in my election. Make sure you come out and vote. June 15th is early voting. And God willing, we're able to finish the job and win our primary in June. Immediately, I am pivoting to make sure Democrats take back the House and Democrats, President Biden, keep the White House. I did it in 2020, okay? 2022. We were all over the country. We were in Georgia. We were in Arizona. We were in Michigan. We were in Pennsylvania. We traveled all over the country to make sure there was no red wave, right? And that we could hopefully keep the House. We didn't keep the House, but there was no red wave, so it worked. We're going to do the same thing again to make sure we get back all three, Because when we had all three last time, even with a slim majority, we passed the Chips and Science Act, the Safer Communities Act, the Infrastructure Bill, the American Rescue Plan, and the IRA. And that was a historic 2 years. So bringing it all back, we can make history again.
You want Jeffries to come and campaign with you in your district between now and June?
Of course. Who wouldn't want
Have you asked him
Leader
to?
Jeffries? I don't know if I have yet, but I will. I know he's all over the country trying to make sure we take back the House. But of course I want Leader Jeffries. I would love to have him in the district. Loves him.
I know you were very excited about the endorsement. So.
Yes.
You've just indulged me in a lot of questions, so I appreciate your time.
No problem.
Is there anything else about this race that you think is important to emphasize, or about your vision for the next few years, or anything that I'm not asking about that you wanted to touch on?
No, I just want to be really clear. This is about people versus power. There's a power structure that is currently in place that my opponent is partnering with in order to take this seat from the people of New York 16. And when I say people, I mean working class, I mean young people, I mean people of color, I mean women. We've governed together with them. And that's why the power structure is in place is pushing back so aggressively. And the fact that my opponent is partnering with special interest groups and racist Republicans who support insurrectionists is insane. And so that's what I want people to be really clear on. This is about people versus power. If I had kept my mouth shut and not challenged power at all, I would have no primary. But I wouldn't be governing with people based on the values that are necessary for a healthy democracy. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we're going to stand on.
Why do you think he's running?
Well, again, he's a puppet for AIPAC.
Okay.
AIPAC told him to run, and he's running. So he's running in support of the mass killing of civilians in Gaza. He's running on famine. He's running on the starvation of children, supported by AIPAC and Netanyahu. That's what he's running on, and that's who he's running for. And the district needs to be crystal clear on this. He's running for that. We're running for the people.